Hi, my name is Risha. I'm 15, and I'm a hack club leader at Seattle, Washington. So first of all, thank you so much for taking the time to talk to us today. So my question is, since you've left Facebook, how do you think they've handled um, misinformation on their platforms, and what do you think they can improve on in the context of handling misinformation?
So I think there's like two different tracks here. And on the people at the working level, they've done more than any other company to try to figure this out, right? So there's a bunch of folks on the teams that was part of starting to build, where those teams are much bigger now. They've got a lot of good people, and they've done a lot of thinking of like, what is misinformation in different categories and such. And then of wrapping it up. I think they had 56 or 57 operations last year where they found organized disinformation activity that they had takedowns. In fact, they just announced 4 or 5 today, one of which my team wrote up. There's a big disinformation campaign in Yemen that looks like it was run by the Yemeni government against their own citizens. This is a side note. When you talk about political disinformation globally, the vast majority of political disinformation is domestic. It is by governments for their own citizens. It is not between countries, for which the companies have like a significant responsibility, not just like Russia and the United States. The place where I think what has counteracted a lot of that is at the top levels of Facebook. They've made some decisions around specifically speech by elected officials that I disagree with, right? So they have exempted certain political actors, including the president, from certain rules. And I think that they have, while that does not fully offset the good work that people have done, it creates the idea that they don't really care, or that these decisions are going to be political. And I think that was a huge mistake, because I think if they, one is, for a lot of political disinformation, I actually don't think you should delete it. This is one of the big issues, is we have to be super careful of the power we give, half trillion to trillion dollar corporations to decide what is acceptable political speech in our democracy. That is an incredibly difficult power. And this is where I differ from some of my journalist friends, because I feel like there's a lot of journalists who are super cool with that power being in the hands of Silicon Valley, because they assume it's going to be used in the way that they agree with, which I am less confident of. Right. And so I think we have to be very careful about what power they have to actually make speech go away. But what people are not owed is the ability to amplify that speech, or to have a huge number of people amplify it. What they're also not owed is the ability to have that speech without it being commented on. And what I would like to see Facebook be more aggressive of is using its own First Amendment rights to, if somebody says something, including an elected politician, that if they don't take it down, that they will, one, choose to disallow certain product affordances that normally would allow for massive amplification, such as people being able to reshare it, so turning off that stuff to reduce its amplification. And two, labeling it with their own First Amendment protected political viewpoint of whether that thing is true or not, right? And the fact that they're doing that much less for certain politicians and certain, it seems, politically connected and important media outlets is a problem. The other thing is that they're afraid to touch anything that is considered media, but like in our current media environment, there's a lot of media companies that don't really care about the truth. They only care about the political side. And I think Facebook has been cowed by the idea that they might have to have a First Amendment right to go label that stuff as true or not true. And so I think what I would like to see is I think honestly, Mark Zuckerberg, what I've said publicly is I don't think he should be the CEO anymore. I think the company has outgrown his ability by himself to run it. I think they need a real sea change in the kind of internal, the way people approach all these problems. And it's very hard to change the culture like that when you have the same people in charge. It would be completely appropriate for him to step aside, to become either just the chairman or become like the chief product officer, and then to have a new CEO who brings in a team who's thinking differently about this stuff. Because I think on politically, like the big political questions, he's been very stubborn, and that is really hurting the company. And it's very hurtful to the people who are working really hard on this, who then have all of their good work wiped out by the fact that at the top of the company, they don't want to utilize what they've done in certain circumstances.